Hi everyone, my name is Felicia. I'm so excited to be speaking to all of you today at the A/B Testing Summit. I am a senior specialist of conversion rate optimization at Tinuiti, and CRO has really just been my passion for the last 5 years. I've enjoyed every moment of being a part of this fast-paced industry and just meeting so many wonderfully intelligent and equally creative professionals like you. I feel that every time I have a conversation, I leave it just learning 10 to 15 different ways for me to improve what I do every day, and to just do it how I do it even better. So I hope that today I can share some of my knowledge and help you, and also inspire you to do what you do every day just slightly better. Just really quick about Tinuiti. We are a full service digital marketing agency. We do paid search, paid social, Amazon email display, SEO, and pretty much anything digital marketing related. We recently went through a series of acquisitions that really led us to our new name. So it's been an exciting year here at Tinuiti, and I can't wait to see what happens next year. So on to the topic that I wanted to discuss today. How many of you have had this conversation before? So I had this amazing hypothesis, I tested it, and it failed. And so maybe your colleague or other conversion rate optimizers will typically respond with, yes, me too. So we'll spend 10 to 15 minutes just talking about the tests that we ran and the negative results that we saw. And it will usually lead to me asking, okay, so it lost, but what other tests came out of that losing test? So in most of my conversations, I've seen the response go two ways. One, either moving on to the next hypotheses and saying, okay, this test lost, there's other tests that I should focus on, so we'll move on to the next test that's higher priority on our prioritization document. Or there's, okay, let's analyze the results. Let's try to understand the reason why users behave that way, and how can we adjust the hypothesis so that we can retest smarter and yield a different result. So if you said that you would adjust the hypotheses and retest, I'd say that I agree with you, and that's exactly what I would want to kind of talk about today. So when you adjust your hypotheses and retest, you're doing three things. One, you're saving time on research. So if you spent 3 to 4 hours of researching your hypotheses and finally coming up with one, then you now are able to make use of that same research that you've done, and you don't have to waste that time and start all over. You have now a better hypothesis. So now that you know that there's one outcome that won't perform well, you have more data than if you were to move on to the next test and test kind of blindly because you don't have testing data there. This way you can adjust your hypotheses, test better, test smarter, and hopefully have an outcome that's closer to what you had expected in mind. Lastly, less time spent on development. How many of you have spent 5 to 6 hours of development time developing a test that ended up failing and then moving on and really just forgetting about that? When that happens, you end up really just losing money because you wasted time on development and there was never a return on investment for that. So what's really important is to think about what can we do to iterate off of a test that's already been built so that your developer can be pumping out 3 iterative tests in the time that he would pump out 1 brand new test. So moving on from that, it's okay to be frustrated. This happens all the time. And, you run a test and sometimes 2 or 4 weeks pass by and you get the result that's not what you expected. And that's okay. But you should never move on from a test just because, you're discouraged and you're upset that you have a loss. Every losing test should be knowledge and should teach you how to make your future hypotheses better. If you aren't doing post-analysis, if you aren't trying to understand what went wrong in the test, then this test was a loser and gave you 0 value. Losing tests, a lot of times in our company, we always share losing tests and we get really excited about them because they typically aren't what we expected and we learn something new from it. And when we test iteratively, we test more ways to learn more about the hypotheses. So because of that, in our conversion optimization team, we love sharing losing tests because the the best tests come from the best tests often come from losing tests when we tested it for the first time. So one of my favorite quotes from Pep from Conversion Excel, you guys all know him, is if you test your hypotheses once, you're doing it wrong. And what I love about this is also one of the reasons why I love conversion rate optimization and just testing in general. Every person brings different experience and different knowledge to the table. And when you have one hypothesis, so let's say I have a hypothesis, I would like to decrease my bounce rate on my homepage. If I asked 10 of you in this room or in, wherever you are, I'm sure 8 out of 9 of you would give me a different way to decrease the bounce rate on my homepage. And that's because all of us have different backgrounds. We have people who are really strong in the creative background or people who are really strong in the design background. Maybe you're a copywriter and you would want to decrease bounce rate using copy. Or maybe you have a UX background and you want to decrease bounce rate using, a special design that can make people more engaged. And so I love this quote from Pep because this really just proves out that all of us are so different, and it makes sense that there's really an infinite amount of possibilities for every hypothesis that you do, which is why if you're testing your hypotheses only once, you're doing it wrong. So here's an example of a test. So the research that you've gathered might have been for qualitative, there's a high scrolling drop off below the fold, and you got that from heat maps from Hotjar. And for quantitative data, the bounce rate on the page is high. And maybe you got that information from GA or whatever analytics medium that you use. So the response or solution that you use is adding a more engaging value proposition to capture user attention and to maintain engagement so that you can keep users from bouncing on the page. Find hypotheses. That sounds solid. However, when you test this, it fails. So when you're doing your post-analysis, are you asking yourself, is your hypothesis wrong? Because your hypothesis isn't wrong. There's nothing wrong with it because you took it based off of qualitative and quantitative data. And really, you can't really say that your hypothesis is wrong. So you really can't know until you've tested every single possible treatment to prove whether or not your hypothesis is wrong. And so you think about that, possibilities are really just endless. You can test this 1,000 times and there's still a trillion other different ways you can create a test that can prove whether or not this hypothesis is true or false. So you should ask yourself, what are other ways to decrease bounce rate, and what can you continuously test in order to get closer to the optimal result that you're looking for? And so the reason for iterative testing is, by not testing beyond the first iteration, you lose out on hundreds of better performing variations on your page. So, if you wanted to so why shouldn't you just move on? And so the reason for that is when you're not testing further than the first iteration, you're losing out on all the possible outcomes of this hypothesis making you money. Essentially, if you test this once and it's making you an extra dollar, let's say revenue per visitor, an extra dollar, there's always going to be other outcomes that are going to make you $3 or $4, but it's really up to you to find it. So if you're only testing each hypothesis with one iteration, that's almost saying that you're making a decision based off of one possible scenario when there could be an infinite amount of possible scenarios that will make you money. And so, moving into a real case study from our client within the checkout funnel, I just wanted to share with you a real life example of how we iterative tested with our client and the outcome that we got from the first test and then the second test. So, US Polo is a brand that's been around for a while. It was established in 1890. They do online e commerce as well as traditional retail, and they've been a CRO testing client with us for 4 years now. Some customer persona information. So, we know just from testing with them for so long that their customers respond really well to UX improvements. They're likely to purchase more than one product, and they're extremely price conscious, and they have high brand loyalty. So our hypotheses here was just, well, making the progress indicator more clear within the checkout, yield a higher conversion rate and also improve the revenue per visitor. And so when we first tested this, we had one treatment for it. Apologies for the slightly blurry screenshot here. But what we did was we added a shipping, payment, and review bar with right underneath the logo. And so our thought was, okay, it's insight. It's very clear which step users are on, and we'll just keep it there so that it doesn't really distract them from the step one, the shipping, and the form fields. What we did was we assumed that users would get the value, placing it beneath the logo here. And the results showed opposite of that. So we ended up seeing a -7% purchase conversion rate, -9% revenue per visitor, and this was at 96% confidence. And so we backtracked and we took a look at the data, and we were trying to figure out why adding a progress indicator within the checkout would tank conversions. To us, it just didn't make any sense. I mean, you improve the clarity of the step that the user is on and you see a -7% purchase conversion rate. To us, at first, we didn't really understand why. So we took another look at it. I discussed with my colleagues and we had a brainstorm session of, what are all of the reasons why we think this test could have decreased conversion rate. So one, we thought that the placement of the progress indicator was too far from the fields of action. So what we were thinking was that when users started scrolling down, they never really saw the progress indicator when they had intention to complete the form. And because it wasn't persistent, when they did scroll away, you would just never see it and it would be out of sight, out of mind. So really we were thinking maybe if users are scrolling away and they don't see it, it's not adding as much value as we thought it would, simply because it's on the page somewhere. And so we redesigned two different treatments, so two other iterations building upon that hypothesis. So our second iteration, our first treatment here was, okay, let's just move the progress indicator to be closer in the visitor's view. We'll place it above the step one shipping, but we'll keep it not persistent because we don't want this to be too distracting to users. We don't want it to take up space, and we just want users to focus on filling out their shipping or payment or review information. So that's treatment one. Treatment two, we wanted to take it, just one step further and say, hey, okay, we don't necessarily know if it's going to be distracting to users. So why don't we just make it persistent? We'll keep at the least amount of information possible persistent so users don't get distracted with a logo or any exit points. So we kept the shipping, payment, and review bar directly above, just persistent at the top of the screen so that wherever users are scrolling, they would see it. And the result was the second iteration, or the second treatment actually won, the one where we had the persistent navigation progress indicator. So we saw a 14% purchase conversion rate this time and a 9% improvement for revenue per visitor, and again at 96% confidence. So of course we were really happy about the result here because one, we didn't have to spend other time doing research except for doing some post analysis on the test results that we had previously run. We definitely made our hypotheses better having that brainstorm session. We tried to understand what we possibly did wrong, and we addressed them using different treatments per variation, allowing us to focus on, fixing problems that we thought existed the first time around. And lastly, the development time spent on this second treatment that gave us a 14% improvement in purchase conversion rate only took our developer 1 hour because the code was already there. All he needed to do was just move the code and add a little bit of code that made the progress indicator persistent. And because of that 1 hour, we were able to get a 14% improvement in purchase conversion rate and a 9% improvement for revenue per visitor for every new visitor that comes onto the site, which is so significant. Just this test alone really paid for a lot of the agency fees they pay for us. So, this was one of those tests that was a huge winner. We were so excited. And so doing some post-analysis on this one, we thought that the persistent design kept the progress bar in the visitor view at all times. And that's probably why the users were able to receive more value out of it. We also made sure that to keep other distractions out of the persistent progress indicator so that users wouldn't get distracted. So we didn't add the logo, we didn't add the free shipping. We didn't add the logo, the free shipping, or all of this checkout information. We kept it very simple, just keeping the progress indicator persistent at top. And also just the improved clarity on the checkout steps, was our primary hypothesis. We were thinking that if a user knew the step that they were on, they would know how many steps are remaining in order to complete their purchase. And so this version was able to really improve the clarity much more than the first version that we tested. So before we move on to the next one, maybe just think about what other tests would you have done as a third iteration for this test. For us, we did shift priorities with the thought that we would go back and we would retest other different ways. But we did find that this was a big winner. And while there could have been other better performing variations out there, this is something that we would test later on because this already yielded such a significant win. Now, if this maybe only yielded 1 or 2%, maybe it would have been a higher priority to find a version that would beat it by maybe 4 or 5%. So many other different ways we could have tested this. We could have tested maybe putting more information persistent, or maybe we could have tested placing this at the bottom of the screen, maybe testing a different style of it, different colors, so many different ways we could test this to see if it would improve conversion rate even more. Moving on to the next case study that we have, and this one was for a luxury sock brand. They sell high-end fashion and athletic socks. They do online e-commerce only, and they've been a CRO testing client with us for 1.5 years. So our hypothesis here was that from the homepage, from the mobile homepage specifically, we knew that the next navigation path for most of them was navigating into the categories. So we were thinking, okay, why don't we just make the primary CTA on the mobile homepage to show categories instead of sending them to a shop all collections page. So as you can see here, the control, when you pressed shop, you would get sent to the all collections page. And in our treatment, when you press shop, we would actually just populate all of the categories for the users to just go ahead and click through without them having to go to the menu to navigate to the category pages. So what we thought was, okay, we're eliminating one extra step. We know that they're going into categories next anyway, so they shop by categories next, so let's just populate those. So the result of this one was really surprising for us because we saw a -2% purchase conversion rate and a -13% revenue per visitor. So we were really puzzled because we knew that the next navigation path was to categories. So how come when we populated categories, when a user clicked shop, they not only was it not performing the same, it was performing worse. So again, we did the brainstorm with our team. We also looped in the client and had the client participate in this brainstorm as well. But we went and talked about all of the things that could have potentially gone wrong. One, we assumed that increasing convenience to the shop all categories would increase conversion rates. We presented visitors with the top menu navigation category. So we just assumed, okay, they shop categories next, so let's just give them categories. And lastly, the menu items weren't expanded, so it didn't really encourage users to click on them to shop, because it would just, here all they see is all women's sock height, occasion featured, and women's gifts. So it didn't really eliminate that additional step to tell them where to shop at. So taking this one step further, after understanding all of this, we did a second iteration where for the treatment, we said, let's just remove all the primary categories. And within Google Analytics, we noticed that the next continuation of their navigation path was indeed the category pages, but it was mostly people shopping by sock height. So for us, we thought, okay, why don't we just remove everything except for sock height, and then we'll just pre-expand sock height. So users can, if they press shop, see the shop all women's socks, or see shop by sock height. And the surprising result for this was a 22% improvement in purchase conversion rate, a 34% improvement in revenue per visitor, and an 89% confidence. And the surprising result for this test was a 22% improvement in purchase conversion rate, 34% improvement for revenue per visitor at 89% confidence. So again, really excited about this test that we had previously built. All we really did was remove the other categories, and we just pre-expanded the sock height. We kept it as simple as possible, and we were able to use about 30 minutes of development time to exchange a negative performing test into now a 22% improvement in purchase conversion rate positive test. So we did some post-analysis, and the insights that we got from this was most visitors were going straight to shop by sock height anyway. So for us, adding the first time around, when we added those additional categories, we were actually confusing users or being more distracting to users instead of being helpful, because now we're introducing all of these new categories that they were shopping by. We also think that the pre-expanded sock height really eliminated that additional step between a user clicking on shop and navigating to the page that they wanted to get to. Previously, the first time we tested this, yes, we gave users a shortcut to get to the categories, but it didn't really give them a shortcut to see sock height. So now that we have it pre-expanded, we are seeing that now. Lastly, removing the other menu category items so users weren't forced to choose between multiple paths also made it just more simple, because now we're forcing users to almost go down the sock height path, and we're really just making it easy for them to go to the next step versus giving them 5 other different decisions on where they should go in order to start shopping. So kind of just to sum all of this up, it's just, I hope that this can kind of be a good reminder to you to just always be testing iteratively. Maybe you guys already do it currently, but I'm sure there's tests that you guys have done in the past that have not performed as well, that maybe you just skipped over or haven't had a chance to get back to. I would really encourage you to look at those hypotheses again, look at the results that those yielded, and see what small tweaks you can make to potentially change a losing test into a winning test. And that's not also to say that, there have definitely been times where I've tested the same hypotheses with 5 different iterations and it all resulted in a negative result. And so, yes, it can be really discouraging, but I did learn a lot from the visitors. And after the fifth time of testing it, I realized, okay, maybe this hypothesis really won't work because of this reason, and this reason. And I wouldn't have gotten that knowledge unless I had tested the test 5 different times. So there's definitely times where that happens, but don't be discouraged of that. Always remember that there is an outcome out there that is positive. There almost has to be, unless it's something ridiculous. But it's really important that you go test until you find that outcome. So, closing remarks, here are just some reminders for you to just see if you can incorporate in your everyday conversion rate optimization. So, understand that there's always a possible solution for a higher conversion rate. So, if you have a winning test that's 1 or 2%, performing 1 or 2% better, there's always something out there or a different treatment out there that can get you up to 10 to 15%. But it's up to you to find that version through A/B testing. Don't forget to test fast, fail fast, and most importantly, learn fast. The more quick you test and the more quick you fail, the faster you learn how to make your hypotheses better. So don't be afraid to be pumping out these iterative tests that only take 30 or 40 minutes to test iteratively versus you starting from scratch for a new test and spending 5 to 6 hours of development time just to have a test that you don't have really high certainty is going to perform well. Never stop improving your hypotheses. So again, the more you test, the more you learn what isn't going to work, which will help you make what is going to work slightly better every single time that you have more data. So take those losing hypotheses and improve them, or even winning hypotheses that yielded a win, but maybe not the win that you were looking for. Take those and improve upon it and see if you can take a winning test and make it a test that wins even more. And test your hypotheses every 6 to 12 months. All of us know how quickly the industry changes. All of us know that, 6 months ago we tested something and now 6 months later, what we tested isn't relevant because people are always changing. And big e-commerce platforms like Amazon really dictate how users prefer their user experiences. So always be testing your hypotheses every 6 to 12 months, even some losing ones that you had a strong feeling would perform well, because the industry changes so fast. You never know if it's going to come back and actually perform in the positive side now. Adapt and stay ahead of the industry as it evolves through testing. So again, people sometimes say, okay, none of my competitors are doing this, so why should I try to reinvent the wheel and test an experience that none of my competitors have? Well, see that as an opportunity, and an opportunity for you to stay ahead of the industry. And maybe you can start getting a 20% lift if you were to test something that your competitors aren't doing sooner than them. So if you were to get a 20% improvement and you implement that 6 months before your competitors, well, think about how much additional money or additional conversions or leads you've just made because you wanted to reinvent the wheel and you tested something that your competitors weren't doing. So really challenge you to think about all of these bullets here and to see if any of these can help you improve how you work. And please, if you have any questions, keep in touch with me. If you have any iterative tests that you want to share with me, email me. I would love to discuss more. If you have any tests that have failed and you're really interested in getting my input on it and seeing how I would test iteratively, I'd be more than happy to share that too. And for now, if you have any questions regarding digital marketing services, you can also contact Tinuiti. And here's the number and the email. You can even set up some time for us to get some coffee. But that's pretty much it. It was such a pleasure to be sharing my knowledge with all of you today. And I hope that at least one of you guys reaches out and we can connect that way. Thank you.